Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in his small command room. His hands were shaking as he watched the terrible scene unfold before his eyes. The USS Vigilant floated silently in the darkness of space, hidden behind a large asteroid. They were far from home, deeper in space than most humans had ever traveled. "Sir, are you seeing this?" Lieutenant Sam Parker's voice was barely a whisper. His face was pale as he looked at his control panel. The young officer had been in space for 3 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Morrison nodded slowly. He could not look away from the display. On the screen, massive alien ships were destroying everything in their path. The ships were dark and angular, like giant metal spears cutting through space. They moved with deadly purpose toward a beautiful blue and green planet below Dot. The planet was called Valdari Prime. It was home to a peaceful species that humans had been watching from far away for the past 2 years. The Valdari people were unlike anything humans had ever discovered. Their bodies were made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. They communicated by creating musical sounds that could travel through both air and space. Their cities were works of art with tall spires that sang in harmony with the wind. Now those cities were burning. "How many ships are down there?" Morrison asked his tactical officer. "I count at least 50 enemy vessels, sir. Maybe more hiding behind the planet." Ensign Bobby Taylor was the youngest member of the crew. His voice cracked as he spoke. "They're not just attacking military targets. They're hitting everything." Morrison watched as bright flashes appeared across the planet's surface. Each flash meant another city was gone. Another 1,000,000 lives had just ended. The Krex Empire was known for being brutal, but this was different. This was not war. This was murder on a scale that made Morrison sick to his stomach. "Sir, incoming." "Transmission from Admiral Carter," Parker announced. The screen switched to show a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and tired eyes. Admiral Lisa Carter commanded Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division from a station 300 light. Years away, she looked as shocked as Morrison felt. "Jake, tell me what you're seeing out there," Carter said. Her voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the tension underneath. "It's bad, Admiral. Really bad." Morrison took a deep breath. The Krex fleet arrived 6 hours ago. They started bombing the surface immediately. No warning, no demands for surrender. They're just killing everyone. Carter closed her eyes for a moment. "Are there any survivors?" Some escape pods made it off the surface. Small ships, too. But the Krex are hunting them down one by one. Morrison felt helpless, watching tiny Valdari ships trying to flee, while massive Krex warships chased them like wolves hunting sheep. "What about the Valdari military?" "They don't have one, Admiral. These people never developed weapons. They're completely defenseless." The connection was quiet for several seconds. Morrison could see Carter thinking, probably running through the same thoughts that were racing through his own mind. Somewhere back on Earth, people were living their normal lives. They had no idea that an entire species was being wiped out while they slept. "Jake, you need to record everything. Document it all. The whole galaxy needs to see what's happening." "Here." "Yes, ma'am. But Admiral, we have to do something. We can't just watch this happen." Carter's expression became harder. "You know the rules, Captain. The non-interference protocol is clear. We cannot get involved in conflicts between alien species." Morrison knew she was right, but that did not make it easier. Earth had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago. Humans were still considered newcomers by the older species. The Galactic Council had made it very clear that young species like humanity had to follow strict rules. One of those rules was staying out of other people's wars. But this was not a war. This was genocide. "Sir, I'm picking up more transmissions from the surface," Parker said. He pressed some buttons on his console. The Valdari are still trying to communicate. Listen to this. The bridge filled with the most beautiful and heartbreaking sound Morrison had ever heard. It was like a song, but also like crying. The crystal beings were singing their final songs to each other as their world died around them. The music told stories of love, of children, of dreams that would never come true. "God help us," whispered Taylor. Tears were running down his young face. Morrison felt his own eyes burning. These were not just aliens dying down there. These were people. They had families and hopes and fears just like humans did. And they were being murdered while the galaxy watched and did nothing. "Admiral, there's something else," Morrison said. "Dr. Amy Foster asked me to collect samples of Valdari technology if I could. She thinks they might have knowledge that could help humanity. But now ... Now we might be watching the end of that knowledge forever," Carter finished. "Keep recording, Jake, and stay hidden. If the Kreks detect you, they'll destroy your ship without thinking twice." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with his crew and the terrible scene on the screen. More flashes appeared on the planet's surface. Each one meant thousands more dead. The escape pods were getting fewer as the Krek ships hunted them down. "Sir, should we move closer?" asked Taylor. "Maybe we could help some of the survivors?" Morrison wanted to say yes. Every part of him screamed to power up the ship's weapons and charge toward the planet. The USS Vigilant was not a warship, but it had some defensive systems. Maybe they could save a few lives. But Carter was right about the rules. If Morrison attacked the Kreks, it would mean war between the Kreks Empire and Earth. The Kreks had thousands of ships. Earth had barely 200 vessels that could fight in deep space. It would be suicide for the entire human race. "We stay hidden," Morrison said quietly. "We watch and we record. That's all we can do." The hours dragged by like years. Morrison's crew took turns watching the destruction, but nobody could really rest. The Valdari songs grew weaker as fewer voices joined the chorus. By the end of the first day, the planet was mostly silent. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up something new," Parker announced. His voice sounded dead after watching so much death. Morrison looked at the tactical display. More Krek ships were arriving in the system. But these were different. They were huge cargo vessels, not warships. "What are they doing?" Taylor asked. Morrison watched as the cargo ships moved toward the planet. Landing craft began descending to the surface. Soon, streams of light began flowing up from the planet to the ships. "They're harvesting," Morrison realized with horror. "They're taking the Valdari crystals, the bodies." The Valdari people were made of living crystal that could store energy and information. Morrison had read reports that suggested the crystals might continue working even after the Valdari died. The Kreks were not just committing genocide. They were turning the victims into resources. "This is beyond evil," Taylor said. His hands were clenched into fists. Morrison felt the same rage, but he forced himself to stay calm. A good captain did. Not let emotions control his decisions, even when those emotions were completely justified. "Keep recording," he ordered. "The whole galaxy will see this eventually. Maybe then someone will do something about it." But even as he said the words, Morrison doubted them. A galaxy had already chosen to look the other way. The Valdari were dying alone, and their final songs were fading into the cold darkness of space. The first day of genocide was ending, and no one was coming to help. 3 days had passed since the killing began. Captain Jake Morrison had not slept more than a few hours since then. Dark circles surrounded his eyes as he stared at the tactical display. The USS Vigilant remained hidden in the asteroid field, watching the systematic destruction of an entire civilization. "Captain, the USS Ranger just dropped out of hyperspace," announced Lieutenant Sam Parker. His voice had become flat and emotionless after days of watching the massacre. "Commander Danny Wells is requesting permission to join our observation mission." Morrison nodded. Wells was a good officer, a veteran who had fought space pirates along the frontier. Maybe having another ship would help, though Morrison was not sure how. 2 ships watching genocide was not much better than one. The communication screen flickered to life, showing Commander Wells' weathered face. The man looked tired, but his eyes burned with barely controlled anger. Morrison recognized that look because he saw it in the mirror every morning. "Jake, what's the situation down there?" Wells asked without bothering with formal greetings. "It's hell, Danny. Pure hell." Morrison switched the display to show the planet below. Where once there had been beautiful crystal cities, now only smoking craters remained. They've destroyed everything. Cities, farms, even small villages in the mountains. Nothing was spared. Wells stared at the screen for a long moment. How many survivors? Maybe a few thousand scattered across the system. Small groups hiding in asteroid caves or broken ships. The Kreks are hunting them down methodically. They're not in any hurry. And we're just going to sit here and watch? Morrison felt the question like a punch to the gut. It was the same question that had been eating at him for 3 days. "Those are our orders. Non-interference." Wells looked like he wanted to say something harsh, but he held back. Both men understood the impossible position they were in. Earth's survival depended on following galactic law, even when that law protected monsters. Back on Earth, the situation was becoming chaotic. Leaked footage from Morrison's ship had somehow reached the planet's information networks. People were seeing the beautiful Valkyrie songs and their terrible end. Protests had erupted in every major city. Senator Karen Mitchell stood before this emergency congressional committee, her voice shaking with emotion. "We cannot stand by while innocent beings are slaughtered. What kind of people does that make us?" Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez sat across from her, looking older than his 60 years. "Senator, I understand your feelings. We all do. But Earth has 200 ships. The Krex Empire has over 3,000. If we intervene, we're not just risking our fleet. We're risking the survival of humanity itself. So we choose cowardice over courage?" Mitchell shot back. "We choose survival over suicide." Rodriguez replied quietly. The debate raged for hours while in space. Morrison and Wells continued their grim watch. The Krex had brought in mining equipment now. Massive machines stripped the dead crystal from Valdari bodies and loaded it onto cargo ships. The sight made both captains sick. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual," called Ensign Bobby Taylor from his station. The young man had aged years in the past few days. "There's a pattern in the Krex communications. They're using an old military encryption system." Morrison walked over to Taylor's console. "Can you break it?" "Maybe. It might take some time, but the pattern looks familiar. It's similar to codes we captured from pirate raids last year." While Taylor worked on the encryption, Lieutenant Parker made his own discovery. "Captain, I've been analyzing the Valdari escape pods. There's something strange about them. The power readings don't match what we'd expect from simple life support systems." Morrison frowned. "What do you mean?" "The energy signatures are too complex. It's like there's more going on inside those pods than just keeping people alive." Morrison studied the sensor data. Parker was right. The readings showed intricate patterns of energy flow that seemed almost like thought processes. "Get Dr. Foster on the communication system," Morrison ordered. "She needs to see this." "Doctor." Amy Foster appeared on screen from her laboratory on Earth. The xenobiologist looked exhausted but alert. Behind her, Morrison could see walls covered with data about Valdari physiology and culture. "Captain Morrison, I've been following your reports. What can I help you with?" Morrison explained about the unusual energy readings from the escape pods. Foster leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fatigue. That's fascinating. We theorized that Valdari consciousness might not be limited to their physical bodies. Their crystal structure could potentially store memories and personality patterns. Are you saying some of them might still be alive, even after their bodies die? Not alive exactly, but their minds might survive in their crystal matrices. It would be like a form of digital immortality, but using organic crystal computing instead of our silicon-based systems. The implications hit Morrison like a thunderbolt. If Foster was right, then thousands of Valdari minds might be trapped in dying ships, waiting for rescue that would never come. They were not just watching people die. They were watching souls fade away. There's more, Taylor announced from his station. I broke the Krex encryption. Captain, you need to hear this. Taylor played the intercepted transmission. The harsh sounds of the Krex language filled the bridge, followed by the computer's translation. Fleet Commander Zith Carr to all units. Phase 1 of Operation Silent Harvest is proceeding on schedule. The galactic community believes this system is under plague quarantine. No interference is expected. Continue harvesting protocols and prepare for movement to secondary targets. Morrison felt his blood turn to ice. Secondary targets? Taylor's face was pale as he pulled up a star chart. Sir, based on their navigation data, I think they're planning to hit the Theta Centauri system next. That's where the Melodi live. The Melodi were another peaceful species, cousins to the Valdari. They were even less capable of defending themselves. Morrison realized he was looking at the beginning of something much larger than one act of genocide. This was the systematic extermination of an entire family of species. On Earth, Admiral Lisa. Carter sat in her private office, staring at the same intelligence reports. Her daughter Emma was serving aboard the USS Defiant in a system not far from Valdari space. The young woman had been sending increasingly desperate personal messages. Mom, we can hear them dying. Every night, the Valdari survivors sing their death songs, and we just listen. How can we call ourselves human if we won't help them? Carter had tried to explain about duty and following orders, but her words sounded hollow even to herself. She had fought in 3 wars to protect humanity. Now she was being asked to abandon the very values that made humanity worth protecting. The breaking point came when Parker detected a new signal. It was weak and fading, coming from a damaged Valdari ship drifting toward the system's outer edge. It's a child, Parker whispered. The signal is from a Valdari child. Morrison listened to the translated message. The young Valdari was no bigger than a human infant, but its consciousness carried the wisdom of its elders. Through broken harmonics, it sang a song of forgiveness. Even as its ship failed and death approached, the child forgave all species for not helping. It sang of hope that someday beings would find the courage to stand up for each other. Commander Wells broke the long silence that followed. Jake, I can't do this anymore. I can't just watch. Morrison understood exactly how. Wells felt. Every human instinct screamed at them to act. But acting meant breaking the law that kept Earth safe in a dangerous galaxy. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. But there has to be something we can do. Some way to help without starting a war. Morrison looked at his crew. Young Taylor, with tears in his eyes. Parker gripping his console until his knuckles were white. Even the hardened veterans were breaking under the weight of what they had witnessed. Keep monitoring, Morrison said finally, and keep recording. Maybe someone with more authority will find a way to act. But even as he said it, Morrison was beginning to form his own plans. The child's song of forgiveness had shown him something important. The Valdari were better people than their killers. Maybe it was time for humanity to prove they could be better too. In the distance, Another Valkyrie ship's lights went dark forever. President Henry Walsh had not slept in 48 hours. He sat in the Oval Office at 3 a.m, surrounded by his closest advisors. The leaked footage from the Valkyrie system played on screens around the room, showing the final moments of a dying civilization. Outside, protesters filled the streets of Washington, demanding action. "Mr. President, the situation is getting worse by the hour," said Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his tie loose around his neck. Intelligence reports confirm that the Kreks are moving toward the Theta Centauri system. They plan to hit 6 more species over the next month. General Susan Blake leaned forward in her chair. The tough military woman looked older than her 55 years. "Sir, we have 3 options. Full military intervention with our entire fleet, covert rescue operations to save refugees, or continued observation while providing secret humanitarian aid." Walsh rubbed his tired eyes. Each option carried enormous risks. Military intervention meant war with an empire that had 15 times Earth's naval strength. Covert operations might work for a while, but would eventually be discovered. And continued observation meant watching millions of innocent beings die. "What does the Galactic Council say?" Walsh asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. Nothing officially. Privately, several members have expressed concern, but no one is willing to act. The Kreks Empire has too much military power. Most species are afraid to oppose them. Walsh stood and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see the lights of the protesters. Signs reading "Save the Valdari" and "Humanity Must Act" filled the streets. His own people were demanding that he do something their government might not survive. "Sir, there's been a development," announced Rodriguez. "Dr. Amy Foster has made contact with the surviving Valdari consciousness. She's in the lab right now, trying to establish better communication." Across town, Dr. Foster sat in her research facility staring at a complex array of computers and crystal matrices. After days of work, she had managed to interface human technology with a damaged Valdari ship. The crystal being inside had been trapped for nearly a week, watching its people die while unable to help. "Hello," Foster said softly into her microphone. "Can you understand me?" The response came as a series of musical tones that her computer translated into words. "I understand. I am Harmonizer Sylphen. I have been waiting for someone to hear our voices." Foster felt tears in her eyes. After all the death and destruction, here was proof that Valdari consciousness could survive. "Sylphen, I'm Dr. Amy Foster. From Earth. We've been watching what happened to your people. I'm so sorry we couldn't help. Your sorrow honors our memory. Tell me, why did your kind not act? Are humans bound by the same fears as the other star children?" Foster struggled to find the right words. "We have laws. Rules that say we cannot interfere in conflicts between other species. If we break those rules, our own people might be destroyed." "Ah, I understand. You must choose between safety and righteousness. It is a choice we never had to make, for we knew only peace." Sylphen's tone carried both sadness and wisdom. "But I must tell you something important about your species." Foster leaned closer to her equipment. "What do you mean?" "The Valdari have watched many young species grow among the stars. We provided subtle guidance to those who showed promise. Your people received such help during your early journeys beyond your world." Foster felt shock run through her. "You helped humanity?" "When your ships first ventured into deep space, they encountered several dangers that could have ended your expansion. Solar storms, hostile alien probes, navigation hazards. We provided small corrections to your courses, warnings that appeared to be natural phenomena. We wanted to see if humanity would develop wisdom along with strength. The implications were staggering. Without Valdari help, humanity might never have survived to join the galactic community. Earth owed its current position to the very people they were now watching die. There is more you must know, Sylphen continued. The Kreks do not kill us only for our crystal bodies. They fear what we represent. They know that someday, species like yours and mine will grow strong enough to challenge their empire. They eliminate us while we are young and weak. Foster felt ice in her veins. Are you saying Earth is also a target? Your world is already marked for what they call containment protocols. In 10 of your years, perhaps less, they will come for humanity as they came for us. The massacre you witness now is practice for your future. Back in the White House, President Walsh received Foster's urgent report. The news that Earth was already targeted for destruction changed everything. This was no longer about helping strangers. This was about humanity's own survival. Mr. President, General Blake said grimly, if this information is accurate, then we're not choosing between intervention and safety. We're choosing between fighting now or fighting later when we're alone and unprepared. Walsh nodded slowly. The moral equation had shifted. Helping the Valdari was not just the right thing to do. It was the smart thing to do. But he still faced the problem of Earth's military weakness compared to the Kreks Empire. How many ships can we actually deploy? Walsh asked. 215 vessels that can fight in deep space. Most are cruisers and destroyers. We have some converted cargo ships with weapons, but they're not built for real combat. Against how many Krek ships? Intelligence estimates 3,000 frontline vessels with more in reserve. Mr. President, in a straight fight, we would lose badly. Walsh was quiet for several minutes, thinking through options. Finally, he made his decision. Get me Admiral Carter on the secure line, and prepare to recall our ambassador from the Galactic Council. In the Valdari system, Admiral Lisa Carter received the encrypted message from Earth. She had expected this moment for days. Her own daughter's messages had become increasingly desperate, describing the psychological trauma of listening to dying Valdari while being forbidden to help. Carter activated Emergency Protocol 7, a classified directive that allowed field commanders to act independently when Earth's survival was threatened. She began recalling every available Earth vessel from patrol duties, trading missions, and diplomatic escorts. Commander Danny Wells received his orders while watching another group of Valdari refugees die. The USS Ranger and 12 other ships had been secretly gathering at a staging point behind the system's largest moon. Wells looked at his crew, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination on every face. All right, people. We've got our orders. We're going to save as many Valdari as we can, and we're going to show the Kreks Empire that humanity doesn't abandon its friends. Captain Morrison felt relief wash over him when he heard Carter's plan. The USS Vigilant would coordinate with the rescue fleet, using their knowledge of Kreks positions to guide the operation. For the first time in a week, Morrison felt like he was about to do something right. Dr. Foster worked frantically to establish communication with more Valdari consciousness. Matrices. If Earth was going to war, they needed every advantage they could get. The crystal beings possessed knowledge of Kreks' weaknesses that could help humanity survive the coming battle. Sylphen, we're going to try to save your people. But we need your help. Can you tell us anything about Kreks' military tactics? Your courage honors both our species. Yes, I can share what we learned during their attack. The Kreks are powerful but arrogant. They believe no young species can threaten them. This belief makes them careless. President Walsh stood before a joint session of Congress, preparing to announce the most important decision of his presidency. In a few hours, Earth ships would drop out of hyperspace and announce humanity's intention to stand against genocide. The consequences would be severe, but the alternative was worse. "My fellow Americans and citizens of Earth," Walsh began, "today, we face a choice that will define what kind of species we become. We can remain safe and silent while innocents die, or we can stand up for what we believe is right, regardless of the cost." Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Constitution, watching her fleet assemble. 215 ships from Earth's Navy, Merchant Marine, and civilian volunteers. It was not enough to win a conventional war, but it might be enough to save what remained of the Valdari and send a message to the galaxy. "All ships report ready, Admiral," announced her communications officer. Carter took a deep breath. Once she gave the order, there would be no turning back. Earth would be at war with the Krex Empire, and humanity would stand alone against the darkness. Signal the fleet. We jump in 30 seconds. Today, we show the galaxy what humans are made of. The space around Valdari Prime shimmered as 215 Earthships dropped out of hyperspace. The fleet spread across the system in a formation that Admiral Lisa Carter had planned for days. At the center flew the USS Constitution, humanity's newest battleship. Surrounding it were cruisers, destroyers, converted cargo ships, and even armed mining vessels. It was not the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, but it was the most determined Fleet Commander Zethkar of the Krex. Empire received the alert on his flagship moments after the humans arrived. The massive alien looked at his tactical display with something close to amusement. His dark scales reflected the red lights of his command center as he studied the approaching formation. "Commander, the infant species has sent ships to interfere with our operation," reported his tactical officer. "They have approximately 200 vessels." Zethkar's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. 200 ships against our 300, and they are young, inexperienced. This will be an easy lesson for them. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. When Admiral Carter's face appeared on his screen, Zethkar felt only contempt. The human female looked old and weak compared to Krex warriors. "I am Fleet Commander Zethkar of the Krex Empire. You are interfering with a legal quarantine operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Carter stared back at the alien commander with steel in her eyes. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Force. What you call quarantine, we call genocide. We're here to stop you." Zethkar laughed, a harsh sound that made his crew flinch. "Your species has been spacefaring for 50 years. Mine has ruled the stars for 50,000. You cannot comprehend the forces you are challenging." "Maybe not," Carter replied calmly. "But we're going to try anyway." The first shot came from a Krex heavy cruiser, a bolt of plasma that lit up the darkness of space. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a squadron of light cruisers, watched the energy beam streak past the USS Vigilance hull. "All ships, weapons." "Free," Carter's voice echoed across the human fleet. "Protect the refugees and show these bastards what Earth is made of." Morrison smiled grimly as he activated his ship's weapons. After days of watching helplessly, it felt good to finally fight. "Back. Take us into the asteroid field, Helm. Let's use the terrain to our advantage." The USS Vigilant dove between tumbling rocks and debris from destroyed Valdari cities. Behind Morrison came 5 other human ships, using the obstacles to mask their jolt. Approach toward a group of Krex destroyers. Commander Danny Wells, aboard the USS Ranger, took a different approach. His ship was larger and more heavily armed than Morrison's cruiser. Wells aimed straight for the center of the Krex formation, his guns blazing as he charged the enemy line. "Sir, we're taking heavy fire," called his tactical officer as the ship shook under enemy bombardment. "Keep going," Wells ordered. "We need to draw their attention away from the rescue ships." The human strategy quickly became clear. While the larger ships engaged the Krex fleet directly, Smaller vessels moved to collect Valdari survivors. Converted cargo ships with extra shielding raced toward refugee camps, hidden in asteroid caves and damaged space stations. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically aboard the USS Constitution, coordinating with Valdari consciousness matrices to locate survivors. The crystal beings trapped in damaged ships provided intelligence about Krek's positions and weaknesses. Admiral Harmonizer Sylphen says there's a group of survivors hiding in the third moon's ice caves, Foster reported. But there are Krek's patrol ships blocking the approach. Carter studied her tactical display. Morrison, can your squadron handle those patrols? On our way, Admiral, Morrison replied. His ships emerged from the asteroid field like wolves from a forest, catching the Krek's patrols by surprise. Human weapons tore into enemy hulls, clearing the path for rescue ships, but the Krek's were not helpless. Their ships were larger and more powerful than anything humanity had built. Zethkar began to organize his forces for a devastating counterattack. Focus. Fire on their flagship, he ordered. Destroy their admiral, and the humans will lose their coordination. Dozens of Krek's weapons turned toward the USS Constitution. The Earthship's shields flared as enemy fire hammered against them. Carter felt her ship shake under the assault. Shields down to 60%, reported her tactical officer. Return. Fire. All batteries. Continuous bombardment, Carter ordered. The Constitution's guns replied with fury, but the Krek shields held strong. It was clear that humanity's weapons were not powerful enough to match the enemy in a straight fight. That was when Lieutenant Emma Carter made her discovery. The young woman was monitoring Krek's communications from her station aboard the USS Defiant, when she noticed something strange about their shield frequencies. Captain, I'm detecting harmonic resonance in the Krek's defensive systems, she reported to her commanding officer. If we could broadcast the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt their shields. Captain Ruth Martinez immediately understood the implications. Can you determine the correct frequency? I think so. The Valdari consciousness matrices are helping me analyze the patterns. They understand harmonic manipulation better than we do. Martinez contacted Admiral Carter with the discovery. Within minutes, human ships across the fleet began broadcasting sonic disruption patterns based on Valdari technology. The effect was immediate and devastating. Krek ships suddenly found their shields flickering and failing. Weapons that had bounced harmlessly off enemy hulls now tore through armor plating. The battle turned in humanity's favor as human creativity combined with Valdari knowledge. Morrison watched in amazement as his relatively weak weapons began destroying Krek's destroyers. I don't believe it. Their shields are down across the board. Wells pressed his advantage, leading a charge of heavy cruisers into the heart of the Krek's formation. The USS Ranger's guns found their targets now, turning enemy ships into expanding clouds of debris. But victory came at a cost. The converted freighter USS Free Spirit, overloaded with Valdari refugees, came under attack from 3 Krek's vessels. Captain Lisa Jones faced an impossible choice. Captain, our engines are failing. We can't outrun them, her engineer reported. Jones looked at the frightened Valdari survivors crowded into her cargo holds. Hundreds of crystal beings who had already lost everything they loved. She would not let them die. All hands prepare. For ramming speed, Jones announced over the ship's communication system. We're going to clear a path for the other rescue ships. The Free Spirit accelerated toward the largest Krek's vessel, its hull glowing from engine overload. Jones kept her ship on course, even as enemy fire tore through her bridge. The collision was spectacular, both ships disappearing in a ball of fire that lit up half the system. The sacrifice was not in vain. The other rescue ships escaped with their precious cargo of survivors. Across the battlefield, human crews fought with desperate courage, knowing that they were not just fighting for strangers, but for the future of civilization itself. Zethkar watched his fleet falling apart with growing disbelief. These humans should have been easy prey. Instead, they fought with a ferocity and creativity that his warriors could not match. Worse, they seemed willing to die for beings they had never met before. "Commander, we've lost 60% of our ships," his tactical officer reported. Fear was creeping into the alien's voice. Zethkar stared at the tactical display. The numbers did not lie. His superior force was being destroyed by an inferior enemy through sheer determination and innovative tactics. "Signal retreat," he ordered reluctantly. "We withdraw to the outer system. This engagement is concluded." Admiral Carter watched the Krek's fleet pull back with grim satisfaction. Her own losses had been severe, but the mission was succeeding. Human ships were collecting Valdari survivors throughout the system, and the enemy was retreating. "Admiral, we're receiving a message from Harmonizer Sylphen," Dr. Foster reported. The bridge filled with beautiful harmonic tones as the Valdare consciousness spoke. The computer's translation carried deep emotion. "Your species has shown courage. Beyond our highest songs. The galaxy will remember this day when humanity chose honor over safety." Carter nodded, feeling the weight of command and the pride of her species. Earth had crossed a line today. There would be consequences, but they had proven that sometimes doing the right thing was worth any price. The Battle of Valdari Prime was over. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Constitution, looking out at the debris field that stretched across the system. 47 Earthships had been destroyed in the 18-hour fight. Over 3,000 human lives were gone forever. The price of doing the right thing had been paid in blood. "Admiral, final casualty reports are coming in," announced her communications officer, Lieutenant Kevin Ross. His young face showed the strain of coordinating rescue operations while under fire. "We lost the Free Spirit, the Guardian, the Defender, and 44 other vessels. But we saved them, Mom." "We saved the Valdari." Carter nodded slowly. The numbers were both terrible and wonderful. Terrible because so many good people had died. Wonderful because their sacrifice had meaning. Scattered throughout the fleet were nearly 200,000 Valdari, consciousness matrices, and 30,000 physical survivors. An entire species had been pulled back from the edge of extinction. Dr. Amy Foster worked in the Constitution Science Lab, surrounded by glowing crystal arrays. The Valdari consciousness matrices were being transferred into specially designed android bodies that could house their minds. It was like watching resurrection happen in real time. "How are they adjusting to the artificial bodies?" Carter asked when she visited the lab. "Better than we hoped," Foster replied, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. "The Valdari minds are incredibly adaptable. They're already learning to control their new forms. Watch this." She gestured to a silver android that moved with fluid grace. Inside the artificial body lived the consciousness of Harmonizer Sylphen, the first Valdari that Foster had contacted. "Admiral Carter," Sylphen spoke through the androids. "Voice synthesizer. Your species has given mine a gift beyond price. We have new bodies, new hope, and new purpose. How can we ever repay such kindness?" "You already have," Carter replied. "Your people's knowledge helped us win that battle. The harmonic disruption technology saved hundreds of human lives." But even as they celebrated the rescue, bad news was arriving from Earth. The galactic community had responded to humanity's intervention with swift and harsh punishment. President Henry Walsh sat in the Oval Office, reading reports that grew worse by the hour. The Galactic Council had expelled Earth from all diplomatic organizations. Trade sanctions were being imposed by dozens of species. Several alien governments that had quietly supported humanity were now forced to publicly condemn Earth's actions. Mr. President, the economic impact is going to be severe, reported Secretary of Commerce Janet Miller. We're losing access to alien technologies, rare materials, and trade routes. Some estimates suggest our economy could shrink by 30%. Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez looked equally grim. Sir, 17 species have officially cut diplomatic relations with Earth. The Galactic Council is considering a complete quarantine of human space. We could be totally isolated. Walsh felt the weight of leadership crushing down on him. He had known there would be consequences, but seeing them spelled out in official reports made them real in a way the theory could not match. Any regrets, Mr. President? Asked his Chief of Staff. Walsh thought about the question for a long moment. Then he remembered the footage of Valdari children singing their final songs, and his resolve hardened. None whatsoever. We did the right thing. History will judge us for our actions, not our profits. The president was right to feel confident about history's judgment, but he was wrong about the immediate consequences. While many species publicly condemned Earth's intervention, others were quietly impressed by humanity's courage. Captain Jake Morrison discovered this 3 weeks after the battle while conducting patrol duties near the edge of human space. His ship, the USS Vigilant, intercepted a coded message from an unknown source. Captain, you need to see this, Lieutenant. Sam Parker announced from his communications station. It's from the Helen Republic. They want to establish secret trade relations with Earth. Morrison studied the message with growing amazement. The Helen were a mid-level species with advanced manufacturing capabilities. If they were willing to trade with Earth despite the sanctions, it meant other species might follow. Over the following months, 17 different alien civilizations made covert contact with Earth. Some offered technology exchanges. Others proposed mutual defense agreements. A few simply wanted to express their support for humanity's actions at Valdari Prime. The message was clear. While the Galactic Council publicly condemned Earth, many species privately admired humanity's willingness to stand up for the innocent. Earth's isolation was becoming independence, and independence was becoming strength. Admiral Carter was promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces and given the task of preparing humanity for future conflicts. The Krex Empire would not forget their defeat, and Earth needed to be ready for revenge. We can't fight the way other species do, Carter explained to her staff during a strategy meeting. We don't have their numbers or their technology, but we have something they don't understand, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Carter developed new military doctrines based on lessons learned from the Valdari intervention. The Carter protocols emphasized rapid response to genocide, protection of threatened species, and cooperation with alien allies who shared human values. Dr. Foster made breakthrough after breakthrough in her research with the Valdari consciousness matrices. The crystal being's knowledge of quantum harmonics advanced human technology by decades almost overnight. New weapons, shields, and propulsion systems emerged from the collaboration between human engineering and Valdari science. We're not just saving the Valdari, Foster explained to a gathering of Earth's top scientists. They're saving us too. Their knowledge is making us stronger, smarter, and more capable of defending ourselves. The most important discovery came when Foster learned that the Valdari had been secretly helping other young species for thousands of years. Earth was not the only civilization that owed its survival to Valdari guidance. There was a network of species across the galaxy that shared common values of peace, cooperation, and mutual aid. We're not alone, Foster announced to President Walsh during a video conference. There are dozens of species that think like we do. The Valdari have been building a community of peaceful civilizations for millennia. Walsh felt hope for the first time since the sanctions began. If Earth could connect with these like-minded species, humanity would not have to face the galaxy's dangers in isolation. The opportunity came 6 months after the Battle of Valdari Prime. Intelligence reports indicated that the Krex Empire was moving against the Melody in the Theta Centauri system, just as Captain Morrison had predicted. But this time, Earth was not facing the choice alone. The USS Memorial, humanity's first purpose-built refugee rescue vessel, prepared for launch. The ship carried both human crew and Valdari consciousness advisors, representing a new kind of cooperation between species. Captain Morrison had been chosen to command the mission. "Are you ready for this?" Admiral Carter asked Morrison during the pre-launch briefing. "Yes, ma'am. We know what we're fighting for now, and we know we're not fighting alone," Carter smiled. Intelligence reports suggested that several other species were secretly preparing their own intervention forces. The Valdari rescue had inspired other civilizations to consider their own moral obligations. As the Memorial departed for Theta Centauri, Harmonizer Sylphen stood on the observation deck in its android body. The artificial form felt strange compared to the crystal structure of its birth, but it was alive and aware and grateful. "Your species has taught the galaxy something important," Sylphen said to Dr. Foster, who stood beside it watching the stars. "You have shown that courage is contagious, that one act of righteousness can inspire others to find their own strength." Foster nodded, thinking about all the changes that had followed humanity's decision to intervene. Earth was different now, stronger in some ways, more isolated in others, but definitely more true to its own values. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Foster asked. Sylphen's android face could not smile, but its voice carried warmth that needed no expression. "You gave my people hope when we had none. You risked everything for strangers. If that is not righteousness, then the word has no meaning." In the distance, stars beckoned with the promise of new adventures and new challenges. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but humanity was no longer facing it alone. The Battle of Valdari Prime had ended one tragedy and begun something larger. A community of species willing to stand up for each other. That no one was supposed to step in when the Valdari faced extinction. But Earth's war fleet had shown up anyway, and that single act of courage was changing the galaxy one species at a time.